This is the terrifying true story behind the Death Angels. Do you believe death is simply a natural process, a quiet end to life's journey? What if I told you a phenomenon exists so disturbing and so carefully hidden that just knowing about it puts you in danger? This isn't fiction. This isn't entertainment. This is a warning. The Death Angels. That's what the first investigators named them. This was before their research was seized, before their names vanished from official papers, and before they themselves started to disappear one by one. What started as a strange pattern, noticed by only a few researchers in 1947, has become one of the most thoroughly recorded and brutally silenced events of our time. I must be clear, I am not sharing this information lightly. Everyone who has tried to gather this research has faced serious consequences. Some simply vanished, others had their reputations ruined, their careers and lives methodically destroyed. A few just went silent, vowing never to speak of their discoveries again. Yet the pattern goes on, and someone must record it before all proof disappears. It all started in Black Fork, West Virginia. On November 17, 1947, Samuel Weiss, the local coroner, was called to examine a body found in the woods outside town. The dead man, Martin Keller, a 43-year-old mining engineer, sat against a tree, eyes open, with no obvious injuries. Officially, his death was listed as heart failure, natural causes, case closed. But one detail remained. Weiss noted it in his private journal, which researcher Thomas Holloway later got in 1963. According to Weiss, Keller's eyes held perfect reflections of winged figures. These images seemed caught at the exact moment of death, visible only when light hit at certain angles. Weiss brushed this off as an optical trick, just light playing on the cornea, nothing more, he thought. 3 weeks passed, and a second body turned up in the same way, then a third. All were within a 7-mile circle, all sat against trees, all showed no signs of a fight or injury, and all had those same reflected images in their eyes. Weiss started an unofficial file of his own. He took pictures of each victim's eyes before burial. He recorded how the bodies were placed. He noticed another pattern. Every victim had been reported missing for exactly 27 hours before they were found. Not 26, not 28. It was precisely 27 hours from the last confirmed sighting until the body's discovery. By February of 1948, the death toll reached 7. Local police called the FBI. Agent Lawrence Merrick arrived on February 11th. The very next day, February 12th, all of Weiss's unofficial files were seized. By February 14th, the case was officially closed. All deaths were blamed on a local heart problem caused by specific environmental issues in the area. Weiss received strict orders never to speak of the case again. He obeyed. On February 28, 1948, he died by suicide, hanging himself. His final journal entry, which somehow avoided being taken, held a single chilling sentence: "They don't arrive at death, they bring it." The Black Fork pattern stopped. 7 deaths, 7 bodies, 7 mirrored images. The case slowly vanished from memory, hidden beneath official stories and the march of time. Life went on, the world moved forward. Then on December 3, 1952, in Clarksdale, Mississippi, Eleanor Wilkins, a 36-year-old librarian, was found. Her body sat against a wall in an empty barn, 2 miles outside town. There were no signs of injury. With eyes open, the victim was found, reported missing exactly 27 hours before discovery. Dr. James Holland, the local medical examiner, noted strange reflections in the corneal tissue within his report. Officially, the cause of death was natural. 6 more deaths soon followed. The pattern was identical, 7 victims total, each found seated upright against a vertical surface. Holland's private records showed every victim had the same reflected images in their eyes, and each had been missing for precisely 27 hours. Unlike Weiss, Holland refused to keep his fears secret. He reached out to medical colleagues in nearby counties. He sent letters to the state medical board. He even tried to publish his unsettling findings in a medical journal. His article was rejected. His letters received no reply. His colleagues simply stopped returning his calls. On March 17, 1953, federal agents arrived in Clarksdale. They quickly confiscated all of Holland's records. The official explanation blamed undiagnosed heart conditions made worse by winter weather. The case was then closed. Holland did not take his own life. Instead, he simply vanished. On April 2, 1953, his car was found abandoned on a rural highway. Inside, agents found a single, chilling note. They come in sevens. They appear as angels. They are not angels. The terrifying pattern repeated itself. 7 deaths struck Wichita, Kansas in 1959. 7 more occurred in Albany, New York in 1966. Then 7 more in Oakland, California in 1974. Years and hundreds of miles separated each cluster, yet every single one followed the exact same deadly pattern. Local authorities investigated each time, but federal intervention always suppressed their findings. Each lead investigator either faced silence, public discrediting, or complete disappearance. In 1963, Thomas Holloway, a criminology professor at Columbia University, started connecting these disturbing cases. What began as research for a book on unusual death patterns quickly consumed him, becoming a relentless obsession. He traveled nationwide, interviewing witnesses, family members, and local officials. He painstakingly gathered the scant documentation that had avoided confiscation. Slowly, he built a timeline, a pattern, and a terrifying theory. By 1975, Holloway had identified 84 deaths across 12 clusters, spanning nearly 3 decades. Every single one bore the same chilling signature, officially dismissed, and each linked to investigators who had either vanished or been discredited. He compiled his extensive research into a manuscript titled The Death Angels, a pattern of supernatural predation in modern America. However, the manuscript was never published. On September 14, 1975, a fire destroyed Holloway's office at Columbia. All his priceless research vanished in the flames. His academic reputation suffered a systematic dismantling, plagued by allegations of research misconduct and mental instability. Columbia dismissed him from his position, and his earlier publications were discredited. He eventually died in obscurity in a psychiatric facility in 1983, diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. But one copy of his critical manuscript survived. Holloway had sent it to Rebecca Chen, a former student, just days before the fire. Chen kept it hidden, too terrified to come forward after seeing Holloway's professional ruin. In 1991, facing terminal cancer and with nothing left to lose, she finally passed the manuscript to investigative journalist Michael Grayson. Grayson, initially a skeptic, approached the material cautiously. He meticulously fact-checked Holloway's research. This meant verifying death records, interviewing available witnesses, and searching for any new cases fitting the eerie pattern. What he uncovered disturbed him profoundly. Not only were Holloway's documented cases verifiable, but the horrifying pattern had continued unabated. 7 deaths occurred in Boulder, Colorado in 1981. 7 more struck Portland, Maine in 1988. Then another 7 in Austin, Texas in 1995. Grayson's investigation revealed a terrifying acceleration. The time between these death clusters was rapidly shrinking. He also uncovered a detail Holloway had missed, a link to local folklore existing before each cluster of deaths. At every location, in the year before the first death, people reported seeing strange things in the sky. These weren't typical UFOs. Witnesses consistently described winged human figures, always appearing at dusk or dawn. Most people dismissed these sightings as optical illusions, large birds, or mass hysteria. They never reached national news, remaining local oddities quickly forgotten until the bodies began to appear. Grayson put all his discoveries together into a series of articles. The Atlantic Monthly planned to publish them starting in November of 1997. But the first article was stopped just 1 day before publication. The entire series was canceled. Grayson lost his job. His research vanished from his home office. His computer files became corrupted. He then started getting threatening phone calls. Strange figures were seen watching his house. On December 12, 1997, Grayson fled his New York home. He vanished from public view, communicating only through secure channels with a small group of trusted friends. From his hiding place, he kept up his research. He documented 7 deaths in Savannah, Georgia in 2002, 7 in Duluth, Minnesota in 2008, and 7 in Flagstaff, Arizona in 2013. The pattern was clear, but the reason behind it remained a mystery. What were these beings? Why did they claim exactly 7 victims before vanishing? Why the 27-hour window? Why were they reflected in the eyes of the dead? And most importantly, why was any knowledge of their existence so strongly hidden? In 2015, Grayson reached out to Dr. Elizabeth Walsh. She was a theoretical physicist who studied unusual scientific ideas. Walsh had independently discovered the pattern by chance while looking into strange electromagnetic events linked to unexplained deaths. Together, they developed a theory so unsettling that both hesitated to write it down formally. They concluded that the death angels were not supernatural in the usual sense. Instead, they were interdimensional predators, beings from a dimension next to ours. They could briefly appear in our reality. Their look as winged human figures was simply how our brains tried to make sense of their real shape. The 27-hour window represented their feeding cycle, the time needed to take whatever energy they harvested from human beings. The reflection in the victim's eyes was not a reflection at all. It was a capture, the very last image they saw before dying, permanently pressed onto the cornea through a process unknown to normal science. These beings were only visible at the moment of death, when the boundary between dimensions briefly thinned. Most unsettling was their conclusion about the pattern of 7s. The death angels were not random hunters, they were careful harvesters. 7 deaths created a pattern, a distinct mark on reality itself. This allowed them to return more easily to the same dimensional points. Each group of deaths acted as a beacon, a kind of doorway, making their next appearances more efficient. This explained the acceleration. Each cluster made the next one easier. The barriers were weakening, and the cycles were growing shorter.
What once took decades between incidents had now shrunk to years, and their calculations showed it would soon become months, then weeks. Dr. Elizabeth Walsh vanished in March 2017. Her research was completely erased, and her academic record changed to remove specific publications.
Colleagues suddenly forgot conversations or projects they had with her. It seemed like parts of her professional life had been systematically wiped away. Michael Grayson retreated even further into hiding. His messages became rare and filled with paranoia. His last confirmed communication, sent to a trusted contact in November 2019, held only coordinates and a date: 47.03 Sweden Ado de Grun, 12/23/19, Aberdeen, Washington, December 3, 2019. On that date, James Keller, a 41-year-old forest ranger, was found in the Olympic National Forest. He sat against a tree, eyes open, with no sign of injury or struggle. He had been missing for exactly 27 hours. Officials listed heart failure as the cause of death. Over the next few weeks, 6 more bodies appeared, all following the same chilling pattern and signature. The Aberdeen cluster became significant not just for its timing, but for what followed. For the first time ever, federal authorities did not immediately seize records or discredit investigators. Dr. Sarah Newen, the local medical examiner, finished her examination and filed her report. It included her findings about strange reflective properties in the victim's eyes. The report became public. For 73 hours before it was classified, it was downloaded 27 times, according to server logs. This information spread, exposing the pattern, and everything began to change. 7 deaths occurred in Traverse City, Michigan, in June 2020. 7 more in Flagstaff, Arizona, in October 2020. Then 7 in Eugene, Oregon, in February 2021. The acceleration was undeniable, yet a new pattern also emerged. Ordinary people, not official sources, now documented each new cluster. Smartphone photos, social media posts, and encrypted message boards shared the details. The information could no longer be fully suppressed, and the death angels appeared to react to this increased exposure. The 27-hour missing window shrank to 23 hours in 2021, then to 19 hours by 2022. The reflections in the victim's eyes grew clearer, more defined. Witnesses started reporting actual sightings, not just before the clusters, but during them. They saw brief, fleeting glimpses of winged figures, always at dawn or dusk, always close to where bodies would later be found. The most recent cluster, in Monterey, California, in September 2024, completely shattered the established pattern. There were still 7 victims, but they weren't found seated against trees or walls. Instead, they appeared in their beds, in their cars, or at their desks. It seemed the entities no longer needed the ritual positioning. They were evolving, adapting, and learning. The reflected images had also changed. They were no longer just simple winged figures.
Witnesses described seeing faces, human-like but terribly wrong. Their eyes were too large, their mouths too wide, with expressions human muscles couldn't possibly create. Furthermore, Dr. Inyan found something else in the Aberdeen victims, something confirmed in every cluster since. The brain tissue showed a unique pattern of synaptic firing, unlike anything seen in normal brain death. It was as if the brain remained partly active after death, still processing and receiving input. The victims weren't simply dead, they were connected, linked to something else, something that continued even after what we call life had ended. This brings us to today. The pattern continues to speed up. Given this progression, the next cluster will likely appear in December 2025. Its location is impossible to predict, but its signature will be unmistakable. 7 deaths, no visible cause, and eyes holding reflections that shouldn't exist. But what truly terrifies me is the deeper truth Grayson uncovered before he vanished, and what Walsh calculated before her disappearance. These clusters aren't random events. They form a larger pattern across both time and geography. When mapped, they create a sigil, a symbol of immense complexity, slowly being drawn across the North American continent. 5 more clusters will complete it, 5 more sets of 7, totaling 35 more deaths. Once this pattern is complete, the barrier won't just thin, it will collapse. This goes beyond individual deaths now. It's about something breaking through, something the death angels are merely announcing, preparing the path for. I've gathered this information at immense personal risk. Already I've noticed strange occurrences in my daily life. Electronics glitching, fleeting movements in reflective surfaces, and the feeling of being watched during dawn and dusk. I don't expect to continue this research freely for much longer. Why am I sharing this with you? Because knowledge is our only defense. This pattern has always relied on silence, on suppression, on authorities controlling information. Yet each time knowledge spreads, these entities are forced to adapt, to change their methods. They fear exposure. They fear being seen for what they truly are. And now you've seen. Now you know. The pattern is real. The death angels exist. They are coming again, and soon. But here's what you must understand. By consuming this information, you've become part of it. This knowledge itself creates a connection, a beacon. They can sense awareness. They are drawn to it. Tonight, check the reflection in your eyes. Look carefully, at just the right angle. You might catch a glimpse of wings. You might see something looking back. Does this sound like paranoia? Like delusion? I understand your skepticism. I started as a skeptic too. But the evidence is undeniable. The pattern is real. The deaths continue. If you've read this far, only one thing remains. Share this information.
Spread it widely. Build a network of awareness too vast to silence, too scattered to suppress. The more people who know, the harder it becomes for them to maintain their pattern. Each person who becomes aware creates interference in their signal. But be careful. Stay vigilant. Watch for the signs, unusual reflections, lost time, the feeling of being watched during dawn or dusk, winged figures at the edge of your vision. If you experience these, you're being marked, you're being selected. The next cluster is approaching, December 2025, somewhere in North America. 7 more victims to continue the pattern, 7 more beacons to weaken the barrier. Will you be among them? Or will you be among those who break the pattern? The choice might not be entirely yours, but awareness is the start of resistance. Knowledge defends against the dark. They thrive in shadows and silence, so bring them into the light. Speak their name, watch for their signs, disrupt their pattern. The death angels are coming. They are always coming. And now they know that you know. Watch your reflection tonight. Look closely. They are already looking back, waiting.